Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to make you aware of a new online course I am offering through the University of Lynchburg's Professional Development Institute. The course is called Thriving Community Arts Strategies for Sustainable Success. This 8-week program will empower professionals and volunteers with the knowledge and skills needed to foster and sustain successful arts initiatives in small communities. There will be interactive online sessions, national research, and practical assignments that are designed to build a robust understanding of the unique challenges and opportunities within our small American communities. There's a link in the show notes to more information about the course and where and how to sign up. I also want to make you aware of a reduced nonprofit rate. You can receive more information about that rate by sending an email to pdi@lynchburg.edu. Again, that's pdi@lynchburg.edu. And now for this month's episode. You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. Well, I am very excited for this episode. I am at the Radically Rural Conference in Keene, New Hampshire. Last year, I was here in Keene, and I had the opportunity to meet with the founders of Nova Arts and Brewbaker's Coffee. And I'm going to actually have lunch there today and see a concert there on Thursday night. So I'm excited about that. But here at Radically Rural, there are a number of really fantastic speakers and representatives of various organizations. And so I wanted to take advantage of being able to do some live interviews here while in Keene. And I'm excited to welcome to the podcast Andrew Huckins, who's the founding member of Lupinewood Collective in Greenfield, Massachusetts, which is a population of about 18,000. And Lupinewood Collective is a queer and trans collective of organizers and artists aiming to build long-term infrastructure for art and community projects. And it's a really, really unique collective and really unique community. The theme of the conference this time around is weaving. It's creating social connections, reweaving in some circumstances as American culture fragments and pulls apart. How are we in smaller communities bringing people together? This is a collective of artists and individuals. It's been in existence for 8 years. So Andrew, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It is a pleasure.
Well, great. So I want to start. You all been in existence for 8 years, and you are in a formerly dilapidated mansion that I want to hear more about. And you all have been renovated and enhancing this over the years. You mentioned in your bio that your involvement, you were involved in Occupy Wall Street. You all couldn't find a space where your community could flourish. So tell me why and how you ended up in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
Good question. There's the long and the short, and the short is in the valley around here, there's a lot of colleges and there's a lot of money and projects that come through. And my friends and I tried for many years in that context. Some people who had been involved with colleges, some people who grew up in the area. And we tried down there working with landowners and tried renting space, and we were never able to put something together. We didn't have the experience, to be honest, and we certainly didn't have the money. We believed that area was focused on artists, and we lived in that for a while. But eventually we got enough no's and we failed enough times, to be honest, that we started to look elsewhere. And we had some roots up north in Greenfield, which is about 20 minutes north of this sort of college area. And we moved up there to try to buy a building for $1 from one of the towns as part of a program they had started. And we spent, I want to say, 4 or 5 years in that town. We made a proposal to town that got rejected, a really substantial thing that we all put our hearts into for a year. We also tried to buy a couple of other buildings, and we kept falling down again and again on financing. So we were open to being in a lot of places, but we were lucky that it was Greenfield that we finally found what has turned out to be the most perfect place.
Tell me a little bit about Greenfields too, and why it's perfect. Tell me.
Well, I mean, maybe perfect is an overstatement. There are a lot of places where I could have been really,
Yeah.
really nice, but um, Greenfield, unlike some of the places to the south, is very, it's a little bit more working class, and there's a strong previous generation of anti-nukers and anti-war activists that, well, there's some cultural differences sometimes between generations, tend to be a pretty good bedrock.
Yeah.
Um, there's really nice connections to Boston, New York City, and then up north into Vermont. It's not hard to get into upstate New York.
Mhm.
We're a mile from a train station that connects to most of those places. And I think the balance of rural context, but being very accessible to a ultimately minor city is a balance that has allowed us to kind of both financially manage it,
Mhm.
but also flourish in the early stages of what is, as you mentioned, a very weird project where we've had to learn things for the first time a lot. And, imagining doing that even in Northampton to the south, which is a much more, is a richer city, let alone Boston or New York or some other metropolitan area. I just don't think we could have found some of the space we needed to make mistakes and try things and make it through the first years of getting this thing off the ground.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm attending a session tomorrow, which is actually in the entrepreneurial track, and it is about, um, it is about youth and connectivity and opportunity that exists in rural areas. And I find it interesting for you all that that's where the opportunity was, right? Was in a, which we wouldn't, we at least generationally for me as a late Gen Xer, we all wanted to be in urban environments, or most of my artist friends wanted to be in urban environments. That's where we wanted to be. We wanted to be in major cities. That's where the action was. And the idea of moving to a place that is smaller, more contained, wouldn't have even crossed my mind. But right now, when we do think about cost of living and property values, all the rest of it, that was where the opportunity was. You all, this is obviously your living space. It's a working space. How open to the public is it? Is it something, right? If somebody wants to form that bond, wants to start that process, is there ways that they can connect in on a transitory level? Is that possible?
The best ways to connect are at events that we host and through programs in the nonprofit, which includes a print shop, a community garden, and a music recording and practice space.
That's great.
The building itself and the land, it's sort of divided into levels of intimacy. And so there are areas where people can show up who we already have a relationship with any time of the day or night and do all kinds of things. And then there are other places that are reserved exclusively for people who are living there. We are in these years, again, it's kind of our major project to create many more entry points and ways to be on the land. It really does feel like these first, I can't believe it's been 8 years, but the first 8 years have been about setting up the infrastructure and understanding ourselves and how to overlap so many complicated parts of a life together.
Tell me why you all wanted a collective. Like that's an interesting thing to me because it would be very easy, right? A group of artists, activists, right? I mean, obviously, I could sit here and tell you all the reasons that artists and activists need to be in a collective, but I think it's more important to hear from you all why you all wanted a co-living, co-working space for the work that you do.
Yeah, there's so many moments in the process now of trying to learn how to do this stuff and doing it where it becomes clear that our shared understandings and desires, we haven't really interrogated them together. When I say us, I mean for myself, the people I was around who were in the largely queer radical subcultural space that a lot of us in my group came out of. And the collective living was kind of like that, on the tip of everybody's tongue. I mean, we had all lived in communal, where there's usually one person who's renting a place and they're your friend and you're on their lease and there are 4 or 5 people.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you share meals, maybe you don't. Maybe you have shows in the basement. But all of those spaces were transitional ultimately. There were spaces that we all moved through as young people.
And not yours ultimately too, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And there are emotional dimensions to not having a kind of agency over the space that you're in, but even just the practical architectural issues of how do you live with 5 adults who have different eating habits in a kitchen that's made for a nuclear family. And those were the kinds of things that at least got me personally onto this track early on. It was frustrations in trying to do things that seemed to make sense to do between people and not finding the contexts or even kind of cultural spaces to do them in.
Yeah. I love that. So you all, the collective, how large was the collective initially?
There were 10 of us, and people came from, had a lot of different kinds of relationships with each other and came from a lot of different places.
And I imagine it's probably evolved to over time. How large is the collective now?
There are 7 of us who are in the collective, and 6 of us have been there since the beginning, and one of us has been there for 4 years. So we're pretty long standing now. In the first round of people, like I said, it was this thing that the group of us, I think all the people who moved in, the 10 of us, hadn't really considered the nuances of trying to live together, do political work together, and most importantly, age and learn together over a longer time period. The project has always meant to be a long-term piece of infrastructure. One of the things that was really influential to us early on was watching crackdowns, both just kind of on a municipal level from building departments, as well as intentional police raids on subcultural, radical, collective spaces in the areas we were in. And it felt like there was a slow receding, a slow erosion that's been going on for a very long time of the kinds of long-term, both practical and cultural institutions to inform theories of social change, to inform what it means to grow older doing certain types of really exhausting work sometimes. It felt like those didn't exist for us when we went to go and do the things or learn the things that we needed to do or learn. And so, yeah, so trying to set it up in this long-term way from the get. And what ended up happening is some of the people in the group, they really wanted to focus on their art careers. And they really wanted to continue moving around and experiencing new cities. Or they broke up with somebody and that was a good reason to leave.
Inevitably, the shifts that happen in our lives move people around. I think it's actually pretty extraordinary that after 8 years, there's 6 original members. That says a lot. I think I'm going to jump to a question I had later because I think I want to kind of get into this because the art and the political work is obviously focused on community. We can think about the community broadly. We can think about the country. We can think about the world. A lot of this conference and a lot of the focus of the work that I'm doing in and around small towns and arts movements is a lot of what's happening on the local level. So how does that work? What is the relationship to Greenfield, Massachusetts? How does the work manifest itself there, or does it? Is it a home base for broader, bigger action, on a national, global level?
Well, some of us have been involved in struggles that are fairly far afield. There's a indigenous community that's up north of the border on the West Coast. And we've been pretty intimately involved members of our collective have gone there for months at a time and done intensive frontlines work. We've raised tens of thousands of dollars for them. Um, you know, just to step back about the project, a lot of it is coming from trying to imagine what an ecological life alongside other people looks like. What is it connected to? If we're a group of people who care about the world and ourselves, and we're living together intimately as well as working together intimately, what relates to us naturally? I mean, we can spend all of our time if we want to advocating for a cause that's quite distant geographically to us. And I think there's lots of value and merit to that. But just as people trying to integrate with trying to bring in all of the actual components that make up a life, how much time can go to things that are far off? How much time goes to things outside of our group? How much time goes to things inside of our group and so on the individual? So the project has a lot of components to it, and they involve local work, regional work, more distant stuff, individual work that we all support each other in, collective work we all support each other in. And the idea is to try to find a human ecological balance of learning and growing along a range of ages over time and building the kind of infrastructure that can actually support humanness. So we are involved, for example, in most of the group is trans, and we're involved in the Trans Day of Remembrance that's coming up. We are collaborating with a local queer youth organization, as well as an elder queer organization. And that's an event that we're involved in producing. We also run some programs that are open to the community, free childcare program. We're just launching a collective music recording studio and practice space. But honestly, over time, we're just now turning our focus into really reintegrating into some of the spaces that early on we found it difficult to be in. When we first moved in, we had the experience of some of the local organizers behaving, I'll say, territorially. And it resulted in us getting alienated from pockets of who our peers would be early on.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so we spent this kind of call out culture, infighting stuff. We spent years contending with that throughout doing our work. And it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that we've really fully processed everything that actually has brought up internally and rebuilt relationships that were damaged by things that other people did, and are really kind of intentionally pushing ourselves out into the community now that we've built out the infrastructure we need to actually be sustainable and both weather the kinds of challenges we've come up against and really go after some of the goals we have.
Share a little bit of what the art looks like. How does it manifest itself? Obviously, I want to talk a little bit about the storefront that you all have too, which is great. And I'm pretty sure you started that storefront.
It's not a storefront, it's a website, but yes.
Website. Okay, website. That's great. That's great. Digital storefront, I'll say.
Great.
So I think, yeah, share with me a little bit of what that art looks like. I have some ideas of what it might be. Audience might have some ideas, but obviously it's specific. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, talking to that ecology of living a life and trying to do work that is multifaceted and connected to all the parts of our humanness. The art is through everything. It's people have very different art practices. I live with a bunch of tattoo artists who do really phenomenal work. They also have two-dimensional, painting and illustrative practices. I live with a phenomenal painter who makes an incredible piece of work maybe once a year. And I think about my own role coordinating parts of the project as an art project. I ran into somebody yesterday who was talking about social practice art, and that's how I think about it. It feels like what we're trying to make, it's not just a tool, it's a beautiful tool. It's a tool that reminds you why you're doing it when you use it. It's a tool that makes you stop and appreciate your life and the things around you. And So one form that art has taken, we had somebody who was recovering from an opioid addiction who stayed with us for a couple of years. And when she first moved in, she basically didn't speak. And she refused almost all accommodations that we gave her. She slept on the floor in her own room, but on the floor under a blanket that we had used to catch paint splats. And over time, she went to different areas of the house and made art out of them.
Hmm.
She made that blanket that she used became this painting years later, that she made in the midst of cleaning out the ghosts and cobwebs from our basement, which she spent maybe 2 months doing. And over the course of that time, the objects were seamlessly involved in her own emotional process of trying to heal from the things she had been through, of trying to heal the house from the actual material problems it had, and bring a kind of like generative beauty back into spaces.
Mm.
So that's a poignant example of how art and living together can weave together, but it's constant. We just hosted a weekend for our friends where we basically a planning session and celebration. And we're all obsessed with beauty alongside trying to get these material gains. So it's you have to like keep it out. Everything ends up treated with some kind of art.
One of the qualities that I've found over and over again that leads to success in rural arts projects is collective action. I mean, I think you can make an argument that collective action is important for anything that we're probably going to accomplish that is making significant impact. I mean, individuals can do things, obviously, and we do think of the arts very often through the lens of individual talents and abilities, but collective action is critical. And one of a couple of different organizations come to mind when I hear about the work you all do through Lupinewood Collective. One is the idea of this. I'm hearing this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the building itself becomes a part of the work, right? And the action of renovating, revitalizing, cleaning up. It becomes metaphoric. It becomes connective tissue for the group. It promotes collective action for a larger project. Is what I'm saying echo what you all are doing?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's amazing how related some of these things. I grew up fairly turned against the nonprofit industrial complex. I feel differently now. I still feel critical about a lot of components.
We can be very critical of it, yes.
But I've understood that a nonprofit is not imbued with those properties intrinsically that I'm critical of. And where am I going with this?
Collective action, maybe we were talking about.
Yeah. It's not just in the art making, it's in what keeps the group together. In fact, the whole basis of the sort of setup of the project was myself and a couple of others struggling with the way that our friends had too many, I called them at the time escape routes, but I think I'd say something a little bit more kind at this point. Where when something got difficult, if someone wasn't getting paid to do it, wasn't with their partner, a romantic partner, or it didn't have to do with their career or their home space, they tended to just kind of drop off. Creating this physical space created a responsibility for all of us that as we learned to show up for each other in it, it kept us coming back again and again.
Yeah.
And the same thing has been true with an artistic practice where there's like over time, the group is constantly egging itself and each other on to make work, to engage with the world, and to have that weave through all the things we're doing. I was just thinking about an installation project that we did together. And we carried all this rigid foam insulation into the attic. We had to layer it into the rafters. And I caught some of them, but probably 10 layers of this 1 inch thick stuff we had to put in. And in many of the layers, there are pieces of art that people made as they were working with the spray foam and nails and everything. There are messages and cartoons, and there's even a landscape that's buried in there. And so there really is an armature that's created by, I think, for doing lots of human things together, but that's created by sharing a kind of regular space together.
Yeah. That's great. And this is this also, I want to actually talk a little shop about nonprofit because you brought it up. And I have I run a fairly large arts organization, and I will share openly, I cannot stand the setup, right? And I say setup because it feels like a setup, actually, in a lot of ways. It can be really disempowering. There's a certain level of being beholden to funding structures and mechanisms. I myself personally, I make peace with that somewhat in what the trade-off may be ultimately. It's not always super healthy for me personally, but it ends up being a good thing for those who get to experience the work that happens and the community that is formed. And so if this is what it is, and this is what we have in the American system, then this is what I'm going to do. But I'm not a huge fan, I will share. But you all have formed a nonprofit, is that correct? Yes. So tell me a little bit, just nuts and bolts, how it works for you all. Because what I just described, right? And I'm very much in a, we sell tickets, we teach classes, we raise dollars for those things. There are competing interests that always exists. One might call us a sellout, in some regards. But I think in some ways not too. It's complicated. You all obviously have very strong values, and coming out of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and you just mentioned earlier, I imagine a lot of that would be a really uncomfortable space to be in. So, but as you pointed out too, right, there are nonprofit organizations in all shapes and forms, and what they do and how they operate and how they're funded and who their obligations run to. So tell me a little bit about how you all handle that both morally and ethically for yourselves, as well as practically from a standpoint of being able to live in the world, eat, continue to work on the building, healthcare, or anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah. No, great question. And it's been a very long process to figure this out. When we first moved in, we made an LLC and we bought the property with a private mortgage. And that was finally one of the people who've been following us have been like 10 years of working towards this at that point, was able to give us this thing. And we did that because we can add and remove people, and it's it's good for liability. And our intention was to put the land and buildings into a trust or a land trust or a nonprofit. But the zoning and code issues that it brings up to do those things were in the beginning years too big of a hurdle. It was a $200,000 or $300,000 price tag, and it was way beyond anything that we could imagine at the time. So we held it privately that whole time. And as the years went on, we started to realize that we had some real benefits to holding the property privately. And we've decided to continue doing that. We've decided to, as a collective, own Lupinewood, which is 4 acres and about 4 buildings, including this one 6,000 square foot historic stone mansion, as a group of people who, with an intention of being stewards, who pass it on over time. Where right now we're working on bringing new collective members in, figuring out how to integrate kids, and figuring out how to integrate people who are older than us. And the intention is that it is a constant rolling over chosen family of queer and trans people who steward the land and buildings. 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, we launched Lupinewood Institute. Lupinewood Institute has on the board people who are in the collective. It's controlled by the collective.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Institute itself the board members' involvement is only as a kind of final check and balance if anything that's going on in the nonprofit really crosses red lines in the collective. Otherwise, the nonprofit is meant to be a completely separately operating entity. It is the executive director is we talk about as an admin. And the admin's role is to bring together the collective of community projects that make up the nonprofit. Technically, the nonprofit's programs, but they are in effect separate community projects that have come together to share fundraising, logistical support, any other kinds of synergies and community that can be helpful. And we've just gotten through our first year and a half. We have a program that the Institute runs that's the Institute's only program, maybe will continually be the only program that's run by the admins directly, which is a 6-month incubation process for people who want to launch community projects. And if people go through this whole process, which has a bunch of stages of developing goals and how you talk about yourself and so on and so forth, then you become part of the collective of community projects that make decisions by consensus and come together at meetings to figure out what to do together. That includes how to allocate their budgets. Now, that whole thing is based on the kind of cultural space we've generated, the relationships we've generated. These projects can come together and actually get into the kinds of material conflicts that exist everywhere around resources and space and come out the other side on the same side. And that's what we've figured out inside of our group. We're all there because we want to be. We all support each other leaving at any time. The same thing in the nonprofit. We hope the projects in the nonprofit end up outgrowing the space. We hope it's a flywheel. But the basic setup is collective manages and stewards those space and buildings. And the nonprofit facilitates their use by community projects through an incubation program and then the kind of like container that allows these different projects to come together and make decisions.
I like that. It's forming an institution and it's evolving. It sounds like that you would like to see reflected in the wider world, right? It sounds like, and what a great way of maximizing the tool that is or the the realities of the rules of the game that we have with EIN numbers and fundraising logistics and all the rest of it. That there is that it can be useful, right? If structured in a way that is going to be a reflection of who you all are and what you want to do. I do want to talk about as well as the sort of the business components of it. The online store that you have created. Tell me a little bit about that and its importance.
I'm really excited about it. I've become a geek about things that I did not understand were things I was that excited about before this project. And the store is a centerpiece of sustainability over time. There's a project near us that I think is great that attempts to fulfill some of the needs that people meet on Amazon and donate the money. And it talks about itself as an anti-profit project. And I think it's fascinating. One of the realizations I've had to come to as a person who spent the first half of my life trying to live on as little as possible and avoid money wherever I encountered it, that although there are some of us, and I count myself one of them, who could live out of a backpack and circulate around picking up odd jobs if we wanted to, the vast majority of people cannot do that. They have more responsibilities than that. They have a life that couldn't support that kind of flexibility. And central to all of that is money making. So a lot of the subcultural spaces that my group came out of, we speak a strong game about inclusivity and about the importance of spaces being accessible to people who have money, people who have kids, people who have disabilities. But I've learned over time that to realize that you have to take seriously people's need to make money. Our project has been all volunteer. We all work private jobs, and we pay more than other people in our area to live where we live.
Hmm.
And we've done that because of our passion and our group commitment to this project. We believe over time we will bring the costs down. We believe over time we will make the structures we need to make the money we need to continue to develop the place. But it's been all volunteer, and it's been unsustainable because of it. Not that we don't all feel passionate about continuing to put in lots of time and energy, but there need to be troubleshooting around how long-term community organizing work happens, especially as people age and their life circumstances change, and to make it accessible for people who, say, have 4 kids and both parents are working jobs. And until there's an economic engine that we have some kind of control over or agency in, it's very difficult to realize all those individual situations without it being a kind of constant process of trying to call in a favor or connect a specific person rather than coming up with a more collective solution. So this store was launched, its destination is a worker cooperative distro. And that distro will include centrally art from the collective, writing from the collective, and other things that we make. But it will also include work that we believe in from other people, writing we believe in from other people. And the intention internally is to be able to create a handful of full-time, well-paid, living wage jobs. We have people in the collective who really would benefit from that. We have people in our community who would really benefit from that. And it's one of the dimensions of basic supports that we've found is essential to trying to free up people's not just time, but also kind of emotional space. I mean, we put our energy, even if we're trying to have walls up, into the things we do. And so people who are at a job for 6, 7 hours, 8 hours a day, and then go and work on something else, necessarily a lot of themselves goes into the job. If that job happens alongside people they are doing other work with in a context that is respectful, where they have agency and where they're getting what they deserve, then it becomes a synergistic set of relationships.
Hmm.
And it's what we were troubleshooting early on, was that kind of those retreat point, the way that the synergies of a group of people thinking and working together and trying to look for opportunities for each other get kind of blasted apart by people's separate home spaces, people's separate romantic relationships and careers. So bringing careers together is another way of bringing our kinds of intentions and whatnot together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Share, I think share too, and I realize I've been mispronouncing it this entire time. I heard you say it earlier. Lupinewood, correct? Lupinewood Collective. Sorry about that earlier. The Lupinewood Collective, where folks can find that store.
Oh yeah. You can find it on our website, lupinewood.com. Lupinewoodstore.com also works. But yeah, go to lupinewood.com, you'll see it.
And I really do encourage people to do it. I had a chance to, in preparing for the interview, had a chance to look at it. The work is really fantastic, and it's it is to be able to live this life in a smaller community, the affordability of that, but still be able to connect to the outside broader world through digital space. Again, these tools that are available now in the modern world, that I mean, the notion of living in a rural space now is very different. Not all rural spaces, right? There's broadband connectivity issues in various places, and there's lots of things that's different. But at least in the East Coast, most rural communities, right, we can have access to the wide world.
Yeah, one of the big realizations for our group over the last years, I think, has been that through the practice of small scale formations of organizing projects, living projects of community, a kind of cultural information, knowledge, production can happen that can have much wider impacts.
Mhm.
That's especially true in the kind of pile on internet culture that exists. But assuming no viralness or other of these kinds of magic wand moments on the internet, um, we are starting to generate writing and publications that I believe in and that I believe will find their way into the hands of lots of people like I was 15, 20 years ago,
Mm.
searching for people who had more experience than me, but shared my passions around things that frankly have turned out to be very weird life paths over time.
Yeah. Is the collective expanding? Can people who are interested in joining the collective, is that possible for them?
Yes, although we are very kind of organic process, have an organic process around organizing, which is to say, we tend to build trust and relationships bit by bit. So we have a year-long process for someone joining the collective. It involves stages of transitioning into our expectations. For example, we each hold a different position of responsibility in the collective. We have someone who does all the grounds,
Hmm.
someone who takes care of the house, someone who takes care of all repair and construction. And over time, we've developed this system that allows each of us to have our positions of authority and responsibility and to come together and coordinate in a way that makes them sound. It was just chore wheels and just write it on the wall and everybody in their good graces will show up and do it kind of stuff
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Um, sorry, what did you ask?
No, I was asking about if people can join.
Oh,
Like
yes,
it's
right.
the
So we have this year-long process,
yeah.
and there are 3 people right now who are in various parts of that process. Again, the goal is the next frontier of challenges for us. It's like, how does turnover happen over time? We're
Yeah.
all been there 8 years. It'll be 8 years again before we know it. How do kids come in? How do we get old?
Yeah.
But the way to start to get involved and to start towards a process like that is to just start being involved.
Yeah.
And that's where the people who are currently coming into the group have come from is they've been involved in programs, they've helped out, they have relationships. And we really believe in that kind of organizing. Not that there isn't a kind of, there aren't services that are provided to people who are outside of an immediate set of, friendships or relationships, but that relationships and small time one-on-one relationships really matter, and that shared experience matters, and that over time, if we can be in physical spaces together, sharing experiences, we can build the kinds of trust and the kind of self and other knowledge necessary to actually be working together. And so we seldom take a leap of faith with even the most amazing person that we might meet if we don't have shared experiences
Yeah,
and
makes
shared
sense.
spaces.
Makes a lot of sense. One of the things I love about this is how organic it is. I mean, you all are which I think we're always doing, right? We're building things as we go. But I love how you all are implementing structures and policies over time as you discover that it's needed, and I think that one thing I would encourage folks to remember, I mean, I've talked to collectives, some who call themselves literally collective, others who that is really what it is, right? Whether it's a theater company, a group of people went out into the, woods of rural West Virginia and formed a theater company. They're living and working together. They're a collective, right? And also seen projects where people are building something together, right? The structures that they work in, all the rest of it. But what's really important to remember for those out there, particularly in rural spaces, is that um, you can respond to the environment you're in. You can make shifts and changes to it as you need to make it, and find your path in it. And this has been great. I think as we wrap up, Andrew, one thing I want to ask is a little bit about you. I find very often that people find their ways to rural spaces because of something personally to themselves, right? They're either returning home or there is something that they are seeking for themselves, outside of the chaos that can kind of exist in a larger urban market. For you personally, how did this happen? Maybe a big question.
Good question. I don't immediately know what the answer is. Yeah. I mean, I could list all of the specific things that led me there, but why I've ended up with the group of people I'm with and the specific place, I really thought at other points in my life it would be different. I thought I'd be in a major city. I lived in major cities. Thought I would maybe live out in a cabin all by myself in the middle of nowhere. The whole spectrum. One of the defining things that has led me into this world and this work has been the individuals that I've found closeness with. When I was living in Northampton before we moved up to where we currently live, I ran into two other founding members. The group were two of my closest friends, and there was an immediate connection. And it's a moment I remember in my life. I remember I've told many of my close friends about that moment. It's part of my life story. And the feeling of meeting people and looking out at the world in a similar way and feeling that kind of connection, it became the ground on which the rest of this grew. And I don't know, that could have happened maybe in a lot of different places potentially, but I will say there's a way that a rural context seems to I can wrap my head around a rural context. I can start to get to know the people I pass on the street. And it was within a context like that that I ran into these people in the first place. People who I had seen around, people who there was already a bit of a context of us sharing something that was small enough that we could conceive of it together.
I love that. I think particularly the theme of this week at Radically Rural, which is, weaving community together. It is about community. It's about each other and connection points. I really, encourage those who are in rural spaces, that, and I think as we talk about the value of rural spaces to other people, I think it's important. I think people seek that connection deeply right now, in really profound ways. And I think it's exciting. I think it's really exciting what you all are doing. And Andrew, I'm really excited to hear the talk this afternoon too. Andrew will be with two other folks in the field who are working on creative spaces in rural areas. Andrew, before we go, just anything you'd like to share or any place people can learn more about you and any final thoughts?
It's just a pleasure to get to speak to some of this stuff. We sometimes do feel like a real group of weirdos out there up on a hill trying to figure these things out. So just getting to talk about it a little bit is such a pleasure. You can certainly find more information. We're on socials and we have a newsletter and all of that. So please connect and come along on the journey of trying to figure this stuff out together.
Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure. Again, Lupinewood Collective in Greenfield, Massachusetts, population about 18,000. Make sure to look it up and find some really great inspiration about what you two can do out there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner.